Okay. All right, what's up, everybody? It's Kyle with another episode, first episode of the new year with Coach Q, longtime friend of mine from B-Ball Life Training over in Hillsborough. So, Coach Q, thanks for being with me, my friend.
Thanks for having me, man. Happy New Year.
Yeah, Happy New Year. So I thought it'd be great to have you on. I know we met recently, but just throughout the years talking with you, know a lot of the basketball players that have trained with you. Just a really cool thing that you do. So before we dive into B-Ball Life Training, kind of just give people a little background, a little bit about your family, and then I'm going to go into your sporting career, your athletic career, and then we'll go from there.
Okay, family. So what's interesting about my family is that of my generation, with my brother and my sisters, I'm the only athlete. Like none of the rest of my family got into athletics. I have an older sister who did track in high school, but it ended there. Had an other sister who she wanted to do track, but I don't think she ever actually did anything. And that's it. Like nobody else. My parents, my mother says she played basketball. We don't have any actual evidence of that, but she says she did it. So there's that. My uncles, my mother has 7 brothers. Wow. And just the whole brotherly posturing thing from them, they always challenge me with different things. So it's always fun talking with them, talking about how they're going to beat me at basketball or, it's always interesting talking with them about that. And then on my father's side, I don't really know of any. We have a lot going on in music, but not with sports. It's kind of interesting. But I've been obsessive, I guess, just by nature my whole life. So definitely with sports, starting with football and then moving into basketball.
And where did you grow up, Coach Q?
Okay, so that's an interesting story too. So I was born in New Jersey. I was born in Morristown. I grew up in between, like, first 5 years of my life, I lived in Trinidad. My family, both my parents are from Trinidad. Oh. And then I moved back to Morristown for a year and then came out to Somerset. Stayed here till I was about 15. And then I moved to Tennessee and lived with my sister for high school. And then after some college, came right back to New Jersey.
Okay. So you went to high school in Tennessee and you played football in high school?
No. So what happened when I was in the 8th grade, I was playing football and I was playing quarterback on the B team, and I was just getting hit. It was just like I was getting brutalized, and it was freezing cold. And I remember the day. I almost could say I could remember the play when I got tackled. I got sacked. And I was like, you know what? I don't need this. Let me see what that round ball is about. Let me see what that basketball is talking about. Because I was just like, I've had enough. It just wasn't, I wasn't growing. These guys were growing. I wasn't growing like that. And I felt like the whole experience was just about taking hits. I was like, yeah, we could do something else. So so I transitioned into basketball and just never looked back.
Okay, so up until that point in 8th grade, had you played any basketball, or was it a completely new venture for you?
I mean, just by the nature of the neighborhood, you play a few different sports. And I went to middle school at Rutgers Prep, so you get exposure to different things there. So I played a little bit, but not really. Consider myself an athlete, having some speed and coordination and being able to do some things, but really had no real, never played on a team or anything prior to that.
Okay. Yeah. So 8th grade, and did you play on an official team in 8th grade? Did you join like rec?
I was doing like, football, I played Pop Warner football, okay. But in basketball, I didn't play on a team until I got into high school, till I went to Tennessee. Prior to that, it was like rec stuff. It wasn't anything that was well organized or instructed. And well, I guess in middle school they formed teams, but that wasn't that serious either. I did have a classmate who I thought was really good, and I used to compete with him against him daily. We enjoyed competing against each other. So I felt I had something to offer, but really didn't put it together until later.
Okay, so in high school, you start, did you play freshman ball? Did you go through the whole progress of like freshman JV varsity, or was it still something that you were just kind of doing for fun?
My path is crazy, man. In high school, when I got to Tennessee, they didn't. I went to a small Christian school, and with Christian schools, you have one of two types of experiences. Either you have the pedigree, the well-known name, Montrose Christian, or this thing that's like everybody knows it and is supportive of it, and they're powerhouse and they recruit players and that type of thing. Or you have the volunteers and the people who are trying to do the right thing. They're nice people. They're really trying to help out certain kids, and have a wholesome education. I had the latter. So I didn't, it wasn't anything established when I got there. It was built when I got there. And so I played on some very odd team situations starting out, but it was like, hey, there's an opportunity to do it. My sister she sold me on something that really wasn't real, because the way she didn't know anything about sports. So what she told me I was moving into was not what I moved into. So from that perspective, I got this sun flare. From that perspective, I got there and I was like, oh, I got to deal with what I have, and made the best of it.
Okay, so now what you were thinking going down there. Now, did you play college ball?
No, sir, did
All
not.
right.
Once again, living with her, the issue was that so my sister went to MIT, so academically everything was straight. It was great, but athletically, she didn't have a clue. So 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 we didn't make I didn't make good decisions when it came to recruitment. I made some very poor decisions. I had opportunities that I just turned down because I thought I was going to get what I wanted, which really there was no reason for me to really think that. There was no evidence of anything moving in that direction. But when you're young, you don't know any better, and you kind of just go along with, hey, I'm going to go to Carolina. I want to play with the big boys, and yeah. So that just didn't happen, and so I missed some deadlines, and by the time I realized what was going on, it was too late. I cried for 2 weeks. I got a rejection letter from Carolina, and yeah, that was tough to take. But and then so I went to North Carolina Central, and the coach there did not want walk-ons. He did not want that type of situation. They had a tryout, which was, it seemed as though the tryout was set up just so the coach could say he had a tryout. He wasn't really interested in the guys in the tryout. And so yeah, so that didn't happen. But like I said, I'm obsessive, and whatever I'm doing, I'm going after it. So I've had some really, really cool experiences. And looking back on it, I would say there isn't, considering what my life experience has been, what the journey's been, there's nothing I could say about what I didn't have that I would trade something to get.
Mm.
You know what I mean? Like I
Yeah,
really appreciate the experience that I've had. So I don't have regrets in that nature.
sure, sure.
Yeah.
So how, and towards the end, I'm going to ask you a few questions on that, just advice you can give people.
Okay.
So how do you go from North Carolina Central then to uh, like what's the progression to where you're at now? How did you get into coaching basketball and really becoming an expert coach as far as developing players? Like, how did that unfold?
All right. So well, from since I could remember, I would play between 2 to 3 hours a day, just
Mm,
about every day, until I was probably close to 30. Like
Wow.
just love playing, and playing in the park was really there was something that there was an opportunity to do, which sadly I don't really see that opportunity as much anymore. But there was definitely opportunity to do on a regular basis, depending on, you know, where you live, what town. I mean, in Tennessee, definitely there were people in the parks all the time. When I came back to New Jersey, I lived in Jersey City for a little while, had a park right outside my front door. And then playing everywhere, like playing wherever there's guys playing, just traveling to play. So pickup was, a big part of my um, initial, just the joy of it. And I learned a lot. Basketball to me was like a best friend, to be honest with you. I learned so much from just having the experience of the game, using the game as therapy, right? Whenever you're upset, and you want to just kind of let off some steam, just go play,
Yeah.
take it out on the court. Um, Building a reputation, understanding how people relate to you based on what you bring to the equation as a teammate, as well as an opponent. Um, how you approach it. Do you take it seriously? Are you somebody that can be relied upon? Those qualities. Lately I've been kind of looking back on some of those things to relate stories to players, and it's become more evident to me that there was a lot that dealt with character that I learned through the experiences that I had in the park.
Sure.
And so, I mean, directly, like, not an indirect thing, but directly that I could relate to. So that was a big part of it. I remember one time I was having trouble with a relationship, and I decided to go shoot free throws because at the same time I was having trouble making free throws. So I took a month and I shot 500 free throws a day. And I was like, I'm just going to go out there and shoot. And while I'm shooting, I'm just thinking through my issues, and I'm thinking about what I'm doing with shooting and how, if I approach what I need to do to get better, to be a better person, to relate better to other people, if I take the same approach by just kind of one shot at a time, just one moment at a time, that is guaranteed to empower me and help me get stronger at the parts that I need to get stronger at, as far as recognizing different things that are valuable, or paying attention to details that before didn't seem to really matter to me, but actually affect the whole equation. So those things kind of work together to help me grow. So my free throws got better, but also improve myself through taking those conscious moments.
Fascinating. So you really used it as like you said, a best friend, which is
Yeah.
neat.
Yeah, because I tore my ACL in 2005, and it felt like I lost. It felt like a serious loss. Like I didn't know what was going to happen, how things would turn out afterwards. So it was scary. But what I did was, I started working towards getting my legs stronger, and I took all the information I was given, and decided just to commit to doing all that I could to make it better. But through that process, I got to learn another part of myself, because when you're doing certain things, you get so caught up in what you're doing that your awareness could be kind of ignoring another part of it that you could really help you. So I learned other parts of things, other things that I could be doing that I could bring value with, that I could feel good about. Since the time I would be going to play basketball, it's like, well, what am I going to do now? So I started kind of just dabbling in other things, and also the other thing was that right before I tore the ACL, the game that I was playing, I played pretty much the same way. It's intense. So when I look back at that, I was like, well, if that was the last time I'm ever going to play, I don't have any regrets with that. I feel proud of what I brought to the table. I left everything on the court, right? So a story that I relate to players, the players that I train a lot, is about graduating high school. For all the ones who are in high school, or approaching graduation, I talk to them about how your senior year is probably going to be your most memorable year. So try to make it as good as possible, right? And regardless of what difficulties you're going through, or how you feel about certain situations, try to focus on the parts that you could feel good about, so that once you look back on that memory, that dominates your thoughts versus the parts that fell short or parts you were disappointed by. And so in consideration of, if that was the last time I would ever play, to look back on it and say, well, when I ended it strong, but that wasn't the case. That's dramatic. But, when you're hurt,
Yeah,
like, you go through these emotional things.
sure.
And so, so that I've had some really great moments that are just connected to basketball. So that led me in a direction to wanting to do things to help other people with basketball. I love helping people. I love learning, the whole concept of learning, more than teaching, actually. But the turning point was actually around 2000, 2001, when Xbox started getting real popular and One mixtape was out. Those two things I credit to really ruining my experience in the park, because with the Xbox, the guys that could play, they used to come out to the park, started staying home twiddling their thumbs. And with the and One mixtape, the guys who didn't seem to be that good started trying to do these and one moves. It was just like, dude, you can't even score a regular layup. Like, why are you trying to do crossover moves and make people fall? So so those two things really affected, how the experience in the park was. And I just decided at that point, I was like, I can't keep coming out here and feeling like I'm wasting my time. So I said, I want to do something constructive towards helping others with basketball. And I had a friend whose her little sister played for this AAU program, which was FBC Defenders, ran by John Stone, who I offered to help. I don't know if you need any help, but if you do, I'll be willing to help. I didn't really want to be a coach. And he's like, well, he's telling me about coaching. I'm like, I don't really want to coach. I just want to help players. And he's like, well, what do you think coaches do? And I'm like, I know a lot of coaches that don't really help players. I was like, the way I want to help players is more from the individual standpoint. The coaching stuff, I'll leave that to you. You know about how that goes and everything. I didn't feel I had a tremendous amount of great coaches traditionally in my situation, in my whole experience playing on teams, especially coming from that small Christian school. I transferred my senior year to a pretty big school, but it was only my senior year. And, and then not playing in college and having different leagues and things going on. It just wasn't really the type of coaching that is that you would see from, some of the better teams that are known, for basketball. So I didn't really have a great impression of coaches. The people who helped me at the Christian school, they were great people, but I just didn't feel they really knew a lot about basketball. And at that stage of my life too, being so young, you make some stupid decisions. So I'm thinking, I'm like, you're not even better than me. Like what is it that you have to offer? I wish somebody had enlightened me. I wish I would have been enlightened to understand it doesn't matter if somebody's better than you or not. If they have a good concept, why do you care where it comes from? Right? It's something useful that's going to help empower you. You need to keep your ears open. So that's part of what when we say respect the game, we talk about what it means. That's part of what it means to us. The fact that regardless of how respectful you feel of who's on the other side of the ball or how you compare with them, if you're respectful of the whole situation, then what you take away from it is where the value really is. So you're smart enough to recognize that. So at that time I wasn't smart enough. And so so my impression of coaching was just like, I don't want to coach, but I know I have something valuable to offer these players because I've been able to impact the game whenever I play. So, I want to help them understand how to do that from where they are. And so I would go to the practices, and he did mentor me into coaching to help me get a better understanding of what developmental coaching actually is versus what a lot of what I see is being done most places now. It's just kind of they just want to showcase talent. But he did help me understand how to take the concepts that I was bringing to the table and make use of it with the players so that they can actually be empowered by it. But the part that I wanted to focus on was more so, just seeing a player in practice that's kind of struggling with understanding what's being taught. Because the way it goes, the way we teach is from, we usually start with a drill. And then from the drill, we then, kind of eventually figure things out. We eventually discover what the problems are. We eventually discover how it interacts with an opponent. Usually a drill has no opponent. And when you're being taught a drill, you're not being taught the skill that goes to the game directly. It's mimicking that skill, right? So the drill is something that has to be taught by itself. So we teach the drill. And so now I'm really focused on you learning the drill and mimicking what the drill is about. But then when it comes to the game, there's usually a part of what you did in the drill that transfers, but there's other things you have to adjust to that wasn't a part of the drill. So it makes it still difficult to be able to execute that in a game. And so I'm, in watching that, I'm saying I could help these kids. So I'd pick one or two of them that I thought who really seemed like they were into it and really wanted to try to get it. And I would offer to help them. I say, meet me 15 minutes before the next practice. And I'll work with you on it. And so when they show up, I've never been I'm just going to tell, because that was one of my issues with a lot of the coaching that I had experienced. A lot of coaches I find are really interested in what they're telling a player, but doesn't seem like they're as interested in how the player receives it or what they actually do with it. It seems like they're more interested in how they're connected to what they told them versus the player's experience and what they're getting from it. So to me, I was like, I'm not trying to be your coach or anything. I really just want to help you. So tell me where you're at. If I start telling you and I don't really know where you're at, am I really interested in you, or am I just interested in doing the job of telling you? Right. So I would start with, this is what you guys were working on yesterday. Explain it to me. Tell me in your words, how that works. Show me how you think that works. This way I could identify the parts that were missing. And then I would help them fill in those gaps. And usually I do it with questions. I still do it the same way today. I do it with a lot more questions than just answers and telling. So I'll ask them questions to kind of open up their perspective on things they may not have considered, or just to show them, to see how they connect to, the process in terms of how I want to convey it to them. And then from there, we work on it. We identify the part that needs to be adjusted and, work through that. And then now I'm taking this as, now we have a dialogue that we're starting that's going to be an ongoing dialogue. So now I'm watching them through the next practice to see how they're making use of it and that type of thing. Well, I just actually about 2.5 months ago, I just realized, because I've been saying to these players all these years that I didn't do drills coming up. We didn't have cones and 2 balls and all these things that they have to work on any type of development. And we didn't have trainers or anybody who was really trying to show us, do it this way and make these adjustments. You just play. And it was what we call the food chain, right? So somebody's on top. There's somebody who's top dog, who's like the best here. And then you just don't want to be the bottom. Like, just don't be the bottom, right? You got to be better than somebody. So you're fighting for that. But that whole process is motivating enough to say, I'm going to do something to consciously work on what I'm going to deliver the next time, right? As well as from the last time, something that didn't go right, you would take time to work on that. So I'm telling this story of how I didn't do drills, but as I'm telling it, I'm telling them about this work on how I could do it better the next time. I'm like, damn, that's really like a drill. That's as close to a drill as I've come. The closest thing is that. But I'm telling them, I'm like, I never saw it as a drill, because the difference was I'm focused on the game execution. I'm not just, nobody told me do that 10 times. It's not broken down the way you guys have drills. And another thing I've said a lot over the years is that I feel like players are overtold, and the difficulty rather, I find today for a lot of players is that every time they're on a court, somebody's directing them. So their self-awareness and how they connect to those things that really kind of could bring out the best version of themselves, they're not as directly connected to it most of the time, because they're kind of waiting to be told what to do next, or waiting for somebody else's recognition of what adjustment to make. And what we had to do, we didn't have a choice. We had to recognize for ourselves. We had to make those adjustments. And so I tell them, inside of my what I did, it was like a drill. I'd say, okay, this didn't work last time, and I'd work on it against nobody, but at game speed, like with the conditions in mind, like imaginary defender, everything in place. And I would only do it until I was really comfortable and confident that I could do it against somebody. And then guess what? I'm not just doing that and moving on. And when the game shows up, I'm doing something else. I'm doing that in the game. You're going to see that today. Like, and that was the other thing I related to them, that you guys are taught these things, but you have no real connection to it. So, we could work on this type of finish, and then the game comes, and that never crossed your mind to actually use that in execution. Right. So, so that's the disconnect. What I want to do now is really help make that connection stronger. That's what I'm really excited about right now. Working with players on making those connections stronger so they could tie things that they need for the game to what they'll do to prepare for the game.
Excellent. It's really neat, man. It's, your philosophy on that. So let me ask you this then, Coach Q. Throughout the years, you kind of developed your own philosophy. Are there any coaches, whatever sport, doesn't even have to be basketball, at the professional or college levels, that you kind of cement, that you've really admired and have kind of taken some of their ways of teaching? And who are those, if they are there?
Wow, it's a ton. Absolutely. So the funny thing, once I approached Coach Stone and offered to help, and we had our conversation. We had a couple of emails back and forth that really laid it out. And at that point, I was very excited. And so I went to the library to look up, basketball, coaching, training, whatever is out there. And there was nothing. The only thing that was out there were VHS tapes on football. So I'm like, all right, I'm gonna roll with this. This is all I got. So I'm bringing home VHS tapes on football, and they're talking about football, and it's very unrelated. I'm thinking, well, maybe there's something I could pick up, because I didn't pay attention in regards to, the things that I want to share. How does that connect to coaching somebody or coaching a group of players? It really wasn't on my radar. So I'm watching this, I'm thinking, okay, maybe there's something I could pick up about the structure and the order, and I don't know. But the thing that I actually got from it was how body control related to contact. And basketball is not considered, by most people, it's not considered a contact sport, but there is contact involved. And so from that, it started, it was, that planted the seed for me to develop a defensive system that is basically using football tactics to limit what an offensive player could do. You can't block the same way as football, but you can put your body in the pathway of an opponent, and using contact in that way was like, I'm going to be here as you're coming. If I get here before you're there, then, there's no violation on me. Right. So without getting into all the details of it, using concepts like that I learned from those football DVDs, I developed some concepts that apply very well to basketball. So there's no names involved as far as that's concerned, because that was the very beginning so long ago. It's 22 years ago now. Then, getting online and researching, finding DVDs and other material from coaches. There's a ton of stuff now, and it's all on demand and everything digital. But at that time, you had to buy DVDs. So I'd buy DVDs, and then I would, as I built relationships with coaches, I would trade with them, and we'd trade back and forth. So there's a ton of coaches, and I'm a note taker. So like I got these are my notes from this morning. Right? Wow. Like, I'm a note taker. So nice. So I've taken notebooks full of notes regarding different concepts, and then looking to apply it. When I first started, though, I didn't, like I said, I wasn't really trying to coach, but the thing that I was given responsibility for was conditioning. So I was like, okay, I'm going to have a plan. I'm going to have it written out, and we're going to get through it. So the way I do plans ever since then, early Google days with Google Sheets. So I lay plans out like that. And so I've been doing it since I started. And I'm like, it just makes sense if you're really going to help somebody that you have it written out, or you know it, like it's in your head as it's written out, or you have it actually written out. And so from the beginning, that's how I started. I would write everything out, and I'd be like, we're going from minute to minute. This is what we want to do. We want to get through these things. I want to make it intense, and make sure that we're able to touch on all the areas that you need to modify and adjust. So from that start, it was some basketball coaches, but it was also, track and once again the football, the conditioning and footwork, and I realized actually early on doing the football footwork, realizing the surfaces being different, we need to do it different. And so there were quite a few things where I'm recognizing the purpose, like connective part is like, I would say that's the theme behind everything I'm doing. How is it connected? So, if we're going to use it this way, why are we doing it that way? Right? We're doing it that way because nobody knew any better. They just took what was available to them. And I learned that, you see that we have a culture in America of volunteer coaches, right? People who are dedicating their time to help young people develop through whatever, right? But it's usually sports we're talking about, but usually, it's a lot of other things are the same way. And so that's beautiful that you have people who are willing to contribute in that way. The difficult part, though, is that some of these people, what they're bringing to the table isn't necessarily what's needed directly by that individual. Sometimes, it's taken real casual or real not as intense or serious, right? We just want them to have an experience and appreciate the opportunity to play whatever the sport is. So that's fine. But as soon as you start getting to the level where you feel that they have some success and you feel they could take it further and you want to raise the level, at that point, to me, it requires some type of educational resource. You need to be able to improve the knowledge that you're bringing to the table. And so that's kind of what I have done. I'm a student of the game on so many different levels, especially with knowledge behind these different things. And when I go at it, I stay at it. So, like, for example, with the Vertimax, I had two sisters that I trained. Their dad bought the Vertimax platform because he did the research on it, and then he brought it to me to use with them, and then he gave it to me. And I was just so honored by that. But because of that, I'm like, okay, well, it didn't cost me anything, so now I got to do my research on how this is being used. And we have, the beauty of YouTube, the fact that you could look a lot of things up. It's tedious in the fact that you never know what you're going to see, because there's some people who really don't know what they're talking about, and they're just out there and they got a camera and they're recording it. But then you also come across the individuals who really put it together well. They're organized. They help you understand how to apply. They make connective things for you. They show you connective things that help growth processes that you could then do and see for yourself. So, I'm a student in that way. I've been YouTube Academy, like, I've been on it for many, many years. So going through things like that, I've learned a tremendous amount from a lot of different people. I stay open to it. So that's, as a whole, I've learned a lot.
Yeah, it's a beautiful thing to hear, because something that struck me that you said earlier is you love learning more than you even love teaching. And that's what you do, really. You teach, you're a coach. But I think I see that with a lot of very successful people is their unquenchable thirst for knowledge and learning, which is great. So what do you, like, you had all those notes from this morning. What are you currently learning? Like, where's your mindset at now? What are you looking to gain at this point?
So I've studied so many different aspects of it. And then my background is business. So I didn't start doing this as a business. I started just because I wanted to do something with basketball. And, I've spent so much time with it, and I felt I really had something to offer. So the whole learning versus teaching thing, really, for me, is how I see it. And I would say, in a nutshell, it's an easy way to explain it. If I learn something, I just want to share that. Like, oh, check this out. I think this is really cool. If you had learned something, I want to know about it, right? So with sharing in that manner, to me, um, we can grow because now we got something we didn't have before. As far as the teaching, there is, tactics of teaching, and I've studied that as well. Read different books on, how to share information better, how to do better presentations, how to even when I when I started with the teams, at the end of every season, I would have an evaluation sheet for the players to fill out anonymously, because I tell them, don't put your name on it. I want you to be brutally honest. Tell me. I just want the truth. I want your truth. It's going to help me get better. I've tried to help you get better throughout this whole season. You can help me get better with this one sheet. And they'd fill out the sheet, and whatever, obviously the most common feedback is probably the area that I need to focus, right? If it's good stuff or if it's bad stuff, right? So if it's something positive, then it's like, okay, that's a strength. I need to go in deeper on that, because that's going to help me to be more effective and be greater at what I'm doing. And if it's something bad, then it's something I need to really make changes with more immediately and put more attention on. One of those areas that were bad was, they would say that, they thought I had valuable information, but a lot of times they didn't fully understand because they couldn't hear me. So I was very soft spoken, and like I said, I want to deal with them one on one and not as a team. And so I would speak to them like we're having a private conversation. And a lot of times on the court with a ball bouncing or other people stuff going on around you, yelling, all that type of stuff that can happen in athletic competition or even in practice, stuff gets lost. And so I had to change how I deliver, in terms of delivering messages, and came with this whole concept of broadcasting. It's like when you speak, you got to broadcast it. You have a message, you're saying something worth being heard, then you got to say it in a way that, sounds like you believe it too. Plus, this way people can hear you, and the message transfers. So through it all, I just wanted to make sure that the things that I'm able to share with different individuals are things that matter to how they can grow. So now the area of focus that I'm pinpointing right now, like what, in terms of directly in basketball or directly through my training, what I'm focused on doing is to try to connect that, what I just told you about earlier, in terms of what I did to help improve myself throughout the years, that I feel is missing from the majority of players. And that is to say, how do we take things that are in the game and then bring it to a connection to how we prepare it, right? So what I said, I've said a lot so far. What I said to you about how we mostly deal with learning in especially in basketball, but a lot of other sports too. We start with a drill and then we eventually figure things out. I'm working on another format. Obviously, certain things have to go that way because of the nature of it. If you don't know anything, how do I help you with something you really don't know about? You got to have some experience with it before we move certain things forward. But there are other things that I can show you the intent. This is what you're trying to do, right? So let's say for like a layup. So in making a layup, we usually start off with a drill. We do it in 5 steps. We start at the basket, just putting the ball up with the outside hand, right? Then we go with a step with the inside foot, raising the outside hand and the outside knee. Then we go 2 steps to keep moving back, and then we go dribbling 2 steps, and we build it till you can just kind of go from anything and finish, and we say the finishing doesn't start at the basket, it starts at the last dribble. How you set up the last dribble will help how you deal with what happens after you take the last dribble and release the ball and get to releasing the ball. So take players through that process, and then we try to play, and then there's shots getting swatted out of bounds because none of that talked about an opponent and how you're going to deal with an opponent, right? So what I've interjected is, we use the outside hand because defender's going to most likely be on the inside shoulder. So this way the ball's away from the defender, so I'll tell them the reason, the purpose behind certain things and why we do it in that certain way. So I'll connect that, but it's still not the same. You're still just kind of following along with what I'm saying. And so I found it for certain things like that, it's better if I show you what the intent actually is, show you a couple different ways that it goes. And then we reverse engineer the whole process. So we start with the intent. We don't end with the intent. We start with that. Then we figure out what the problems are, which are obstacles and adversity. Obstacle being an opponent, maybe even a teammate, right? Depending on where you are and how you're setting it up. Like, don't do it when your teammate's in the way. And adversity being the difficulty in doing that, coordinating the steps, bringing the proper hand and foot going up, your knee going up instead of your heel going up. So those different aspects we start to discover and discuss, and we're able to kind of pay attention to. And then from the problems, then we go to the solution being a skill that we want to develop, and then we can create a drill related to that skill. So this way now it just makes sense in terms of, if you're looking at it, you don't have to know basketball, right? You understand this project that we're doing that we call making a layup, and you understand what's going to be involved. And so, even if you don't have a lot of experience with that, you can still have an understanding of the things that may be involved, and there's a purpose behind what we're doing. So I found that has been extremely useful. Obviously, the nature of it, people can teach all this stuff without any understanding. Just as long as you understand what to do, then we can move forward. But what I found is that when we do it that way, there's a second stage of learning that needs to happen before you can actually play. And so that by itself discourages some people from training, because they want to just do it. Right? Like, why do I have to go through all of this? Like, you taught me all this stuff and I still can't just do it. Right? So they want to just be able to do it. So they'd rather so a lot of people join teams thinking they're going to get better on teams. And there are very few teams that you would be on that you just get better. Right? You get more of an understanding of what's going on. You get more accustomed to what's happening. You get a greater comfort level. You may be a little kind of caught off guard, or I say it's kind of like playing in the street, right? Like the first time you play in the street, it's probably scary. You're scared for your life because your life is on the line. After a while, you probably get accustomed to the speed of the cars, but it doesn't mean you're better at it. It just means that you're just more comfortable with it, right?
Yeah.
I find a lot of that happens in terms of players on teams when they don't have. I mean, how did I start? I started looking at those situations and saying, let me help bridge the gap between the parts that are missing. So that's kind of still what I'm focused on. More specifically, the details I just told you, and then we have a new year right now. We're in day number 4 of the new year, and I started resolutions in 2017 officially. That's another long story, but my resolution for last year was to help players to be more driven, and my resolution, which I'm very proud of the progress that we were able to make. Last year, have a lot of evidence of some really great things happening with quite a few players. So I'm really proud of that. So my resolution for this year is actually to be a better teacher. So what I found is that I'm so focused on the learning that at times I neglect parts of what I could do to be the best version of myself as a teacher. And so I'm going to put more attention on that. And I do everything in that regard to 1%. I just want it just 1% better as I can measure it. So as I review it, which will be regularly, usually daily, but let's say even weekly, if I can make it 1% better, then over the year, then I've done something substantial.
It's huge, huge, man. Really, you've taken this and combined the art and the science, which is very inspiring, right? Because I coach people in fitness, but it's still coaching. This is really cool, man. I mean, we definitely have to do a part 2 of this because there's so many more questions I have for you.
Okay.
Let me ask you. Let me ask you this though, before we tell people how they can find out about your services and whatnot. If I ask you, what's your favorite book? What comes to mind?
My favorite book. All right. So right now, my favorite book is, it's a toss-up. I love Peak by K. Anders Erickson.
What's that about?
So, okay. So I read a lot of books. I read this book called The Talent Code. You know how when you read books, there are people that the author of the book speaks about, right? And these people are referenced. So K. Anders Erickson has been one of those people who's referenced in a lot of books. and he's a professor. Well, he was a professor from Florida State, and he wrote textbooks. And his area is expertise. He studies the science of expertise. And so in the talent code, they talked about him, and also even I guess the most pivotal one would probably be Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell,
Yeah.
right? So Outliers. So okay. So let me. Now you see, I'm getting excited about it. So in Outliers, Malcolm Gladwell comes, he presents the term 10,000 hours, right? So 10,000 hours is a concept that Malcolm Gladwell termed based on the study from K. Anders Ericsson, right? So in K. Anders Ericsson's book, Peak, not to spoil anybody's situation, but he talks about how he never said 10,000 hours. He said he studied, his study was on violinists, and he said that they would play for like 4 hours at a time and have to take a nap. And I'm like, wait, violinists taking a nap? Like what kind of, so the intensity that they play. So Kate, I'm jumping all over the place. His one of his main concepts is deliberate practice. K. Anders Ericsson has, his term is deliberate practice, meaning don't just go through the motions of it. Like you got to really put it in, right? And an example is these violinists who need to take a nap after they play the violin. Like they're playing that intensely, right?
Sure.
So Malcolm Gladwell, he says in K. Anders Ericsson says in Peak that Malcolm Gladwell took liberties to make 10,000 hours sound sexy. He's like, he said, what he actually said was it was 7,500 to 12,500 hours that it took for violinists to get to a certain proficiency. So it wasn't just expertise. It was the proficiency that they got to based on that amount of time that he could then say his measurements and the rest of his study. But Malcolm Gladwell saw an opportunity, which, I mean, it's sticky. It's extremely sticky, as far as the 10,000 hours thing, right? Because it's easy to understand, easy to hold on to. It sounds good. It's easy to say. So a lot of people have gravitated to that, thinking that if I put in 10,000 hours, I could be an expert. So the thing that I love about Peak is that he has the real details of what it takes to be a true expert, and broken down into really simple terms. So that to me is I'll reference that book probably for the rest of my life, because so many different things that you may want to do. And I'm intense and obsessive a lot, but there's things that, you just want it to be better, that you're not so obsessive about, or it's not that big of a deal to you, but it's like, if it's worth doing, it's worth doing well. Right. So, if I can have a great approach to something that I don't have to put a lot of attention on and get leverage on the results from it, then that's worth doing. That's the way I should go about it. And to me, that's what it comes down to on the universal level that everybody should be able to understand. But then when it comes to performance, and when we're talking about sports and being competitive and things where we're looking for, the greatest version of yourself and things of that nature, then it's like, you can't do without this.
Sure. And I'm going to put that on my list, man, because it's not often I hear of a book that I don't know about. That's going on my
awesome
list.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's
very good.
Great.
Tell us, Coach Q, because again, we're gonna have to do a part two. I think people are gonna be very interested in this. What is the best way for people to reach out to you for your coaching services? And I know, guys, I'm going to tell you, Coach Q's very selective in who he takes, which is brilliant. But tell us, how do they reach out to you? What's that process look like?
Okay, so to reach me really is bballlife.com. That's the website. You can definitely get me from there. My Instagram is my bballlife, and you can get me from there. Okay. Those are the simplest ones. The thing, I want to be with who I belong with, and I say that meaning those who are really interested in what I have to offer. I realize that other people who do it differently, and my way is definitely not traditional, but it's really effective. I don't have the desire to be big. I don't have the desire to build this big operation. I just want to be great. I want to be extremely effective. And to do that, it takes a personal touch. I would say I'm more of a concierge, more like you know, Neiman Marcus or Nordstrom's than Walmart or Target.
Sure.
You know, like
Yeah.
it's definitely not for everybody. There are players who I've turned away. And those stories are interesting too. We could talk about probably next time. But in regards to like, I'm thinking of it, if I'm your dad or I'm your brother, and knowing what I know about what the experience is like, do I think this is really going to work for you to get to where you want to go? And it's not to be presumptuous either. It's not like, I'm acting like I know you so well. I know me so well. I may not know you so well. And also I've had people who have come, left, and came back because it just wasn't time when they first came. Right. So there's those types of situations as well. But I just found that it is extremely satisfying working with individuals who I can really contribute to their experience. It's such an honor when you're able to do that and then they accomplish things. It's that there's nothing, I haven't experienced anything in life that's really like that. That's such a unique experience. And so I take that very seriously, because that's kind of it's how the whole thing started.
Sure.
So it's still
Yeah.
there.
Like I said, man, very inspiring.
Thank you.
I always know it's a good one when I get pumped up, listening to to
Awesome.
whoever I'm speaking with, man. So really good, Coach Q. I'm gonna get the notes put up. I'll let people know how they can contact you. And let me just bring this to a close. So hang on one second.
All right.